Thank you, Bryce. Welcome, everybody, to this Sunday morning service here at Salt and Light Christian Church. The story that I have to tell you all this morning is about the reformer Ulrich Zwingli. Zwingli was known as the Swiss reformer, and he was born in eastern Switzerland in 1484 in the province of Wildhaus. At the time, Switzerland was split into multiple autonomous provinces, and not much is known about Zwingli's childhood, but we can assume that he was either raised Catholic or as a youth came to the Catholic faith, because we do know as a young man he joined the priesthood and was taught to become a Catholic priest. And in doing so, he learned to read the scriptures, which was not a common thing for his day. However, as he read the scriptures himself and came to the understanding of what they say, of the gospel, he came to the realization that the current church of his day had drifted away from the origins, from the early church. And so, inspired by men who came before him or during his time, fellow reformers, such as Martin Luther and others, he decided to begin his own Reformation in Switzerland. And so he learned to read Greek so that he could read the New Testament in its original language. And as he did so, he even copied his own version of the New Testament. And as he began preaching during his early days of his Reformation, he started preaching in the New Testament at Matthew chapter 1, verse 1. And he began preaching through the whole of the New Testament in expository sermons, which for his time was completely out of left field. However, Zwingli wanted the average person, the layman, to have an understanding of Scripture and the gospel message. And so he did his best to preach it to the people. As his Reformation grew in popularity around Switzerland, his church began to split from the Catholic Church, and those that followed his preaching were called Zwinglians. And many of the provinces in Switzerland became Zwinglian rather than Catholic. However, several stayed Catholic as well. And as you can imagine, this led to friction in the country. Throughout his life, he worked to spread the gospel. And as the Zwinglians' message was spreading through Switzerland, they met violent refusal from the Catholics. And this ended up breaking out into full-on warfare. And eventually, this warfare would be the cause of Zwingli's death. He died on the battlefield, helping out his fellow soldiers, a wounded. The story goes, mind you, this story is most likely wrapped up a little bit in myth. However, the story goes that while on the battlefield, he was helping a fellow wounded soldier when he was struck in the head by a flying stone, and he began bleeding profusely and from his injury, and so he went to find rest under a tree And as the battle came to its conclusion, he was surrounded by his enemies and eventually murdered. Despite, however, the gruesome affair of his death, his life spoke volumes to the people in Switzerland and around Europe. He was one of the earlier reformers living during the same time as Martin Luther and actually dying before him. However, his message lived on through those that he had preached to and those that were touched by the gospel. And to this day, he, along with the other reformers, message lives on in the Protestant church. So thank you. Let's bring the music up.